As great as the Steeler fan base is, and it is a great one, it's a very loyal fan base, a very passionate fan base. Steeler fans also sometimes go way too far and they let their blind loyalty cloud their judgment. They get very unreasonable. And while they love to die on the hill for their team, which is sometimes admirable for a fan base, they just get crazy and they're just dead wrong. And that's just the case right now, Steeler fans. This is an example of that, Steeler fans. The Tennessee Titans game, your game, the Steeler game against the Tennessee Titans, being postponed because of positive cases throughout the Tennessee Titans. And your reaction to that is an example of Steeler fans going too far, of Steeler fans' blind loyalty clouding their reasonable judgment, and of Steeler fans just being way off base. This is an episode of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and, of course, SteelersNow.com. I'm your host, Mike Asti, and I hate to do this. I really, really do. Some may think I enjoy it, but I hate to do this. Had the whole week planned. This wasn't a part of it. And honestly, these opinion mic drop shows, while I love doing them and while they certainly do churn the dollars as well, they sometimes get put in the back burner during the season, especially during a season like this with so much to cover now through the network, my involvement continuously expanding, and a lot to cover as part of the beat for those different teams. But I just couldn't help myself. I couldn't help myself, and I felt like the bat signal was out there, and you Steeler fans were calling me to comment on your reaction to the Steeler game being postponed. And while I agree it's kind of fitting and almost funny and a bit ridiculous, and this, again, is from somebody who's covered this team for years through Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, to the national anthem drama and Alejandro Villanueva, and everything in between, and even some before, that the Steelers always find themselves in the middle of these ridiculous scenarios of potential drama. They can't ever just have a regular week where it's purely talking football. This is the second time already through 4 weeks of an NFL season. It's been something outside of the game with also what happened with the back of the helmet and the names and all of that from week one. So the Steelers seemingly are never just about football. Certainly the national media doesn't allow it to just be about football. And while some friends of mine that work for the Steelers would always tell me, you guys are welcome to talk football and analyze football, and I certainly do that, sometimes we can't. Sometimes we're forced to not be able to based on things going around that we just can't ignore. Cough, Antonio Brown's situation and that scandal again. But this is something that I couldn't resist as well. Because as you all know, the Steeler game against the Tennessee Titans has been postponed. And it initially was being moved off of Sunday, which clearly made sense when they had positive tests, because forget just the days and the fact that people around those positive people could have been infected as well, and just all the uncertainty of a global pandemic, and the fact that they knew this was going to happen too, and this was something that maybe the NFL should have prepared for better. I certainly could get you there. Certainly should have prepared for this better, but everybody knew this was a possibility going in. And it's not fair. It would have been crazy to have the Titans play on Sunday with no practice at all. So I wouldn't advocate for that just at the initial onset of this. Then the game being moved to Monday or Tuesday. In fact, the NFL, from what I was hearing, was leaning towards it being Monday. The Steelers were hearing it was actually a better chance to be Monday than Tuesday. And I even said at the time that kind of seemed a little crazy because, okay, we agree it's being moved off Sunday. Everyone seemed to be in unison there at least. But what's the difference of 1 or 2 days? 24 hours, all of a sudden it's a better day to play that game? Again, maybe you can get all through the tests. Highly doubt it. And that seemed a bit hypocritical. Do you just want to power through the NFL season if you're in the National Football League? And we know from even going back to the draft and what happened during the initial quarantine and when COVID became a thing and how they just kept powering through. They did adjust. They had to change things. They had to do things virtually, but they didn't want to move off their schedule, unlike the other leagues. And when they didn't have to, they didn't when they were in an off season. Now they're in the midst of a season. They're forced to, but they didn't want to adjust any more than they would have to. So 1 day is one thing. But now the NFL has been forced to postpone the game altogether As I'm recording this, we don't have an official date of when this game will happen. Of course, the Steelers have that bye. Of course, the Titans have their own bye. It's very likely fit into the Steelers' bye, or who knows when that could be if they move things around later on, but it's going to be at a later date. Number one, this game will be played. The NFL wants to play it. That's the right call. This game should be played. Certainly a conference game. You don't want to have two teams that are both playoff type teams be down a game. But you guys have also reacted in a sense where, number one, you're complaining on how it's unfair. I heard a lot of that. I've been seeing a lot of that of, well, this is unfair. They should just treat this situation. They should just treat the Titans as being all of a sudden inflicted by tons of injuries. It'd be no different than if half the offensive line broke their leg somehow during practice in unison. All of a sudden, you would then need to be bringing guys off the practice squad. You would have a ragtag bunch, and I'm sure you would lose the game. But treat it no different. It's just an injury. Well, obviously, that's asinine. You cannot treat a global pandemic, a virus, like an injury, because unlike an injury where you have the injury and that's it, you just have it, you rehab, and you're off on your own. This, a global pandemic, a virus that, again, there's currently not a vaccine for. There's no way to cure altogether. You're kind of just waiting it out and hoping for the best. And we've seen the best of us get inflicted and have a rough time. People that are well even in greater shape, The Rock, for example, than the Pittsburgh Steelers, that you would need to track down anyone who's come in contact with that person. It could infiltrate the whole system. There would be so many players that you would have so much uncertainty about. You could maybe have positive tests by several others. We saw what happened with Rudy Gobert when he touched the mics and then inflicted half of his team with the Utah Jazz, and he didn't think that would be the case. We now know much more now. That was back in March, but still. So it could just linger. It could be out there by so many more. There's so many more tentacles to a virus. It can't be treated like an injury where you just remove one man and that's it, and then you power through and repair and have somebody fill in. No, it's a virus. This is a global pandemic. It is not like an injury. And also, regardless of any of our opinions, no other league has treated this like an injury. We've seen what happened with Major League Baseball. Now, I get it's easier for Major League Baseball with games so often to move games off of a schedule. They can do a doubleheader in baseball. Obviously, in football, you can't do a doubleheader with it being such a physical game. I get it. It's harder. The NFL should have planned better by having a bumper at the end of the season or having multiple buys for teams to be able to then play during your bye if you have to postpone and not screw yourself with an early season bye or no bye altogether. But then that segues in here again, and this is a mic drop edition of Pittsburgh Sports Live and Steelers Now here. Mike Asti at you, the fans, and you brought this out in me. Because many of you have said, okay, well, the Steelers are getting screwed here. This is totally unfair to the Steelers. It's a week 4 bye. This is crazy. They've already practiced halfway through the week, which is another thing because they practiced today. We have that video up on Pittsburgh Sports Live when I'm recording this and before the week closes out. And that's a pain for us in media because I thought we were going to get a bye at some point. Apparently, maybe we're not going to ever receive a bye either, like the players. But it's not the NFL trying to screw anybody. It's not the National Football League running a conspiracy that everybody feels there's always a conspiracy against the Steelers if they don't get a call or something happens with somebody being punished or this situation with a global pandemic forcing a game to be postponed. There's been games postponed of hurricanes, of different things. They've done the Monday Night Football thing. I get it. But this is a virus. We have no vaccine. They don't know the contact tracing. They don't have anybody to put in there. You can't treat it like an injury because it could touch everybody else and just could be running rampant. And there's no guarantee the Steelers or the Minnesota Vikings, who they played last week, could be safe because we just don't know. So that can't be the case. But there's also no conspiracy. The NFL doesn't want this. The NFL wants the Pittsburgh Steelers, a marquee franchise who bring ratings in, who are a team that many of you are not from Pittsburgh to subscribe. And I see you talking to us all the time. You're either all over my Twitter or here on this channel or any of our sites commenting up a storm. I see the numbers with our subscribers and where you're from. You're not all from Pittsburgh. Many of you are not. In fact, I think most of your numbers are not, actually, because there's so much media attention here in Pittsburgh. We're doing this for almost the fans outside of the market in a way. So I get it. I get it. You love your team. I love the passion. That's a positive, okay? And I complimented you at the beginning of this. But here's the other issue. You think there's a conspiracy somehow. You don't get it that they would love the Steelers to be in the Super Bowl. They would love the Steelers to go on a playoff run. They would love the Pittsburgh Steelers to be around. They want that game on. And separate from the Steelers, because they couldn't have predicted which teams were involved here. And I'm sure the NFL doesn't feel that way about the Tennessee Titans. They aren't to the level of the Steelers as an elite franchise or a marquee historical franchise, regardless of this and last season with gameplay. But it's just a black eye. This now is going to bring to light the fact that they didn't really plan for this well. This is going to bring to light that they're going to have this black eye on them, and they're going to not be able to say, like some other leagues, that maybe they didn't have to go through this situation. Although everyone expected this, because in the NFL, you can't bubble. You can't do the National Hockey League bubble, and they especially did it in Canada. You can't take this to Canada. You can't bubble all of these teams, all of this personnel, all of these coaches, everybody involved. You can't. So many media members, we still have some pool reporters that still are able to kind of do the normal business, and then others who have to switch things around. But can you imagine even just taking one pool from each team and having them all there? That would add more people if you somehow did this in a bubble somewhere. It can't happen. You can't bubble the NFL. It just can't be done. And this is bad timing for the Steelers, the Rooney family petitioning to get fans into the stands. And this is not a virus that happened with the Steelers, but still, it's not really a good omen when your game is postponed and you want to have fans in your stands. And that's a whole nother conversation for the day, because I think there should be fans, at least parents for college football and some fans in the NFL. You could spread them out and do it safely, not filling the stadium, but they could have some there at some point. I think that's not crazy. At least cities that did not have this go on. Certainly, I would not imagine Nashville or any cities in Tennessee would this be a thing. Certainly not where the Titans are. But the point of it is, there's not a conspiracy. Number one, there just isn't. That's crazy. They're not screwing over the Steelers. The NFL doesn't want this more than any of you want this, more than I want this, more than any of the players want this. Criticize the way they're handling it, sure. Criticize the fact they didn't have a best plan, sure. Criticize they could have easily put 2 bye weeks in to fix this and save this from being an issue, sure. Fair again. But don't say that there's a conspiracy. Don't say they're doing this intentionally, because I've seen that, and that's just insane. Like every other time, Steeler fans think there is a conspiracy. You also can't treat this like an injury. Of course, it's a virus. It's not an injury. It affects others more than just you. That's totally different. And then lastly here, in summary for my essay of my rant against Steeler fans, or at least your reaction to the Steeler game, your game being postponed against the Tennessee Titans, I, again, make it clear, I think that game has to be played. But at the very least, if it's not, you wouldn't in any way take an L for the Titans. You wouldn't give them a loss. And I think the game, again, has to be played. They will play it at some point. They're going to play it. But when this first happened, many of you didn't even want to have the game moved to Monday or Tuesday, when that was the report. When Monday or Tuesday was going to be a thing, and you just would be losing a day. It would just make our jobs in media harder, and the players would have less of a week to prepare for their next game. But you, the fan, what's the difference? Sit on the couch, have some Cheetos Monday instead of Sunday. Sunday, you got to get up for work the next day. Same thing on Monday. It's no different than a regular Sunday Night Football primetime game, or Monday Night Football would have actually been earlier, around 5 for NFL teams. The Steelers have tons of primetime games. They're a veteran team with the exception of a few new pieces. They're used to it. That wouldn't have been bad. And Tuesday would have been harder. It would have changed the week. I don't think Tuesday would have happened, but still, it's 1 24-hour period. They could have got over it. There's been shorter weeks in the past. It could have been treated like a Thursday night game for the next week or for the week before, with the amount of days that they overall would have gotten. In fact, more days than those weeks if you play Sunday to Thursday. But people wanted the Titans to just forfeit. I saw this even from our subscribers. I'm not going to call you out personally, but I saw some of our subscribers. I saw some of my followers. I saw people out there that normally I have intelligent conversation with that got heated because of this game being postponed. And again, I did think many of you, maybe not those people, but many of you out there were saying that you're not watching the National Football League anymore. You don't care about the NFL. You're done with it, either because of politics or whatever else. Seems like a lot of people are really upset to lose a football game. So many people out there are saying they're done with the NFL. Interesting, because many people are upset when a game gets postponed and a game gets lost. Very, very strange, of course. I'll digress. But where was I going with that? Oh, yeah. People wanted the Titans to forfeit. People were calling for the Titans to forfeit. I actually heard people say, and I actually saw this put into words, that the Titans should forfeit because it's their fault. It's not the Steelers' fault. Guys, we're in the midst of a global pandemic. We're in the midst of a global pandemic. It is a public health crisis. And yes, it's not the same as it was months ago. Yes, I'm not saying don't do the NFL season, don't play sports. I like it. It helps me get some money. It's part of my career. I even earlier said, scroll back if you don't believe me and you're watching this late. You can put some fans in the stands at this point. I would even advocate that still, even though it doesn't help their argument in Pittsburgh, who did not have this issue, and we are a little bit improving. But no one's going to be able to logically say the Titans should be blamed for this. It isn't their fault. How do we know? And I don't cover the Titans, so I can't say this, but how do we know? How do you know? Knowing less of the intricacies than myself, certainly the players, certainly people there in Tennessee know what's going on in terms of their procedures. How do you know they're not following the rules, not following the guidelines? And either somebody went rogue and was an idiot, which would not be the fault of the franchise if a player did that, but we don't know that either. Or number two, it just happened. The NFL said this, Roger Goodell said this, we all kind of knew this was a possibility, that somebody could get inflicted, something could happen, somebody could contract this virus, even if everyone's doing everything right. Because the NFL can't bubble itself like some other leagues. It would have just been impossible to do so. That was not something that was realistic to do. And if you want to have your season, and they definitely do, and I'm saying they should, I think they certainly should. I'm not saying in any way it would have made sense to scrap this season with what's happening with the other leagues and now college football having more conferences play, and the ones that didn't are back into work. So I'm not saying that. But if you want to play, you want to crown your Super Bowl champion, you want to have a 2020 of anything in which there's contact, certainly, and you can't bubble yourself, and you know that, then you know you're going to have somebody test positive. You know you're going to have this issue. You know this is a possibility to have a game postponed. It would have been a miracle to go through the entire season and not have this happen. It might happen again. Would not surprise me. Might happen again involving these two teams. Might happen again involving other teams. And then we'll see based on the schedules what they do. And yeah, it might suck to the Steelers. They're kind of getting screwed over with an early season bye, if that is the case. A bye they've already practiced halfway in and seemingly are going to practice all the way through. I guess they don't have to follow the rules of the bye when normally you're not even allowed to practice during a bye. Maybe they'll still get their bye later because that was going to be middle of the season. It was going to be perfect. But the Steelers had a week 4 bye the year that Ben Roethlisberger won his first championship, which was the franchise's first championship, first Super Bowl title since 1979. They broke that drought with a week 4 bye, winning Super Bowl 40. They've had early season byes before, and it wasn't necessarily in bad seasons. That's being the best. So it can be done before. It's happened to other teams as well that have had all levels of success. And it's just something that may happen every now and then. Look at what happened to the Saints during Katrina. Think of it that way. Was that their fault for when on with the natural disaster? They got screwed without any home games for a while. No. But they eventually got over it and won a championship soon after. So maybe this somehow can galvanize the team. Who knows? This is still a very, very good Steelers team that I thought could go 4-0, might even still be able to go 4-0 with the winner of the Eagles, who are struggling. This is a Steeler team that is in great position to make a run this year. And I, again, in my preview show, right here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and Steelers Now, you can search for it, I said this team would win the division. And that's knowing how good Baltimore is, and those games matter, and those games will happen, hopefully. They certainly will get them in at some point. But this is a great Steelers team. This is a team to be excited about. This is even a better team than last year, even if you put Ben on last year's team. This is a deeper roster, and Ben being here is a big deal. So enjoy these couple years of Ben's career, and this being a good team. And the future outside of quarterback seems actually brighter around the rest of the roster as well. So a lot to be happy about, Steeler fans. Don't inject your anger at things that you can't control or things that aren't at fault. This isn't the Titans' fault. They don't want this. They're also 3-0. They don't want this any more than anybody else. It's not their fault. They could have easily done everything right and still had this happen. The NFL didn't handle this the best, but once they didn't have that second bye, then what are you going to do? They're going to play this game at some point. They should play this game at some point. It makes sense not to play it this week, honestly, especially when you get more positive cases, because in all reality, what's the difference of Monday or Tuesday from Sunday? If you can't go Sunday, you can go 24 hours or 48 hours later. That seemed crazy. That seemed hypocritical. That didn't seem really in tune with player safety that the NFL always says they are. And even though the players are going to be mad, you, the fans, are mad, I'm mad here. The media, we're upset. This isn't normal. We're off our schedule. Throwing the paper in the air like Shelton in the Big Bang Theory in terms of my plan of Steelers coverage this week. But it's what can you do? Okay, it's deal with it, as Mike Tomlin would say. They said that about even the Titans, but just in general, just deal with it. They're not going to make any excuses. Mike Tomlin's not going to make any excuses for this situation. And fortunately, they're undefeated as this is happening. So the Steelers will play Tennessee. They will play them at some point. No, of course, it's not going to be this week. It shouldn't be this week. It doesn't make sense. It would be hypocritical to have it be this week. If you want to criticize the NFL and their handling, okay, that's fine. But there's no conspiracy. You can't treat a virus like an injury. And this is nobody's fault. So you can't force a team to forfeit when they actually did nothing wrong. There's no way to prove they did anything wrong. And, it's kind of a global pandemic that's running rampant. And that's the trick. Make sure, though, while you're here, because I still do love you guys, subscribe to the channel. Click on the subscribe button bottom of the video. It helps us get content easier to you. And certainly there's a lot of it on Pittsburgh Sports Live and across the now family of networks. I'm Mike Asti. Hit me up at Mike Asti11 on Twitter to jaw back and forth with me if you like. But again, Steeler fans, I honestly believe this. You're better than that. You really, really are.